Hey folks, it's David with Streaming Relativity, home of the AstroDNA Observatory.
So I recently published a video on the Interstellar Comet 3I Atlas, and I covered topics like what makes it so unique, its unique anomalies. I covered how to track it with Stellarium, and I also talked about how I plan to image it in December using my Celestron C11 telescope. Now, that video garnered a lot of views and it generated a lot of comments. And it's not surprising that some of those comments contained references to Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard University. Now, Professor Loeb, who likes to be called Avi, his nickname, is actually quite a distinguished contributor to the world of astronomy and to the world of astrophysics. In fact, he was the chairman of the Harvard Astronomy Department for many years, and he is currently the head of the Galileo project at Harvard that is promoting a systematic, transparent exploration and searching out extraterrestrial technology, but using scientific methods. But he's also become a bit controversial, with critics stating he's overly speculative and perhaps sensational about these interstellar visitors. For example, suggesting that 3I Atlas is perhaps some form of alien technology or an alien spaceship. Now, I asked myself, after reading so much about 3I Atlas in the past couple of months, and including Avi's publications and his cohorts, is he over speculative? Is he sensational? And the answer is, I'm really not sure because I don't know Avi personally and I have had no direct dialogue with him. So I said to myself, well, if everybody's thinking this, well, why don't I send an email to Professor Loeb and ask him a few questions, and maybe I'll get a better appreciation for his framework of discussion around objects like 3I Atlas. And so I did. And surprisingly, he responded the same exact day. Not only did he respond via email to me, but he also referenced me in his most recent publication, his blog post on his Medium channel. And so this video is going to be all about those three questions, why I asked them, Avi's responses in verbatim, my interpretation of those responses, and hopefully everybody is going to learn a little bit from this and we'll have a better appreciation for everyone's perspective on 3I Atlas, which is a very foreign body to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link to the original video below. I'm going to have a link to Avi's Medium blog posts. And while you're down there, you might as well hit the subscribe button because this is a pretty cool channel. We've got some really bright people in the community, and I think you're going to love it. And with that, we're going to hop right into the three questions that I asked Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard.
Okay, so let's start with my email to Professor Loeb and his response. So I introduced myself as a retired technology executive and an amateur astronomer who runs the AstroDNA Observatory channel. And I mentioned that this community really values fact-driven content over hype and AI-generated sound bites. So I shared my recent video on 3I Atlas, and I mentioned that it drew thousands of views and it sparked a lot of discussion, and that I wanted to follow up with professional perspectives. So I established the context for my questions for Avi, which is that his view of 3I Atlas, that it may be an alien technology, is controversial, and his thoughts about speculation in the scientific process itself would be welcome. So I then presented questions which focused on three key topics, statistics with tiny samples, speculation concerning the physical anomalies of 3I Atlas, and then finally the scientific importance of 3I Atlas, even if it is a natural object. I gave him the option to respond in writing or recorded video, or even to do a video call, and then I closed with a thank you. And within a couple of hours, Avi responded, and he was very kind and provided a link to a blog post that he prepared in response to my questions. So let's go take a look at that blog post now. Okay, so you can access all of Avi's publications on Medium from avi-loeb.medium.com. And we see here that Avi's opening up with a wish for a new year rich in discoveries of anomalous interstellar objects, specifically referencing the Rubin and Galileo observatories. Of course, the Rubin Observatory in Chile is so important, and this just demonstrates how Avi and others in the field value discovery. And this Rubin Observatory is, of course, a game changer. It's a wide field rapid surveying capability. It's going to dramatically increase the discovery rate of interstellar objects, or ISOs, meaning one every several months. Abi then highlights the viral interest in the five anomalies of 3I Atlas, citing scientific work for each of the cases. He also shares a very important reference to the Loeb scale, or the IOSS, which is a 0 to 10 classification of the anomalous character of an ISO. We'll dive into these anomalies and these links and the IOSS scale when we talk about question 2. Avi then kindly acknowledges the AstroDNA Observatory and presents my three questions exactly as I phrased them in my original email. So I think many people treat probabilities as some form of proof for their theories. And so I wanted to see how Avi viewed the significance of the probabilities that we're measuring for 3I Atlas in light of the small sample size. So the specific question was statistics with tiny samples. Some of the odds quoted about 3I Atlas, such as its retrograde orbit aligning within 5 degrees of the ecliptic plane, or its coincidental timing near Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, they sound extraordinary. But given that we've only observed 3 interstellar objects, how should we treat these probabilities? Do they provide meaningful insight, or do they risk overstating coincidences? Are they even valid in the context of such a small event sample? Now, Avi's response, I'm going to read to you line by line, and I think it's important to unpack it a bit as we go. So the first line is, the alignment of 3I Atlas with the ecliptic plane can be framed in terms of the alignment of its vector of orbital angular momentum relative to the sun. Now, this is important because he's demonstrating that he is a scientist and respects mathematics for what they are. He's reframing my question mathematically, and instead of a relationship to the broad ecliptic plane, he's describing it in terms of its orbital angular momentum vector, which is the direction of its orbital pole. That's the formal way astronomers measure orbit orientation. Good for him for making sure that if we're going to talk about probabilities and statistics, so let's make sure we know what we're talking about. Further, he says the vectors of 3I Atlas and solar system planets are tightly aligned. This is his way of confirming that yes, this is an observation that we've made. Atlas's orbit really is unusually well aligned with the same plane of the planets. He then says such an alignment would be statistically plausible for a random coincidence only after observing a sample of hundreds of interstellar objects. And this is really important. Here's his key caution. With only 3 interstellar objects known, you can't yet treat this alignment as statistically meaningful. And he goes on to further, state that if you were to choose 3 random arrival directions, remember these are interstellar objects that are approaching us from somewhere, you would find that the chance of one of them being retrograde and aligned with the ecliptic within 5 degrees is below 1%. Now he adds on top of that, if you adopt the actual trajectory of 3I Atlas and choose the arrival time at random, you would find a very tiny probability of getting as close to Mars and Jupiter as 3I Atlas does. Now, again, this is just reinforcing that, not only is it odd for this to have such polar alignment, but it's also the timing is also odd, and it further reduces the probability of this thing happening. But the key takeaway here is that Avi's not drawing any conclusion about the nature of 3I Atlas based solely on the odds of its orbit. Rather, I think he's pretty clear that we need hundreds of ISO observations before these statistics and probabilities become meaningful. So my second question deals with the anomalies of 3I Atlas, and I was hoping he would speculate on the natural as well as alien explanations. He focused his direct response on my reference to exotic interpretations, but we have to look at his entire blog post to appreciate his full response to this question. So let's read how I phrased it. Physical anomalies. 3I Atlas shows unusual traits, a CO2-rich coma, nickel-rich but iron-poor composition, an extreme negative polarization, and low inversion angle. Which of these might point to a natural explanation, and at what point should we allow room for more exotic interpretations? Let's look at Avi's response to this, sentence by sentence. Anomalies should trigger exotic interpretations in the mind of imaginative scientists. He's saying that anomalies are not red flags to ignore. They're invitations to think outside the box. And all of science is advanced when strange data has sparked new thinking. And that's how I feel about this. He then goes on to say, however, dogmatists act as thought police and use all the tools at their disposal to suppress imaginative thinking. Now, this is a this is a classic struggle, I think, for all progressive scientists. And I think he's just trying to draw a contrast between being open-minded as a scientist versus conforming to the beliefs of the gatekeepers. And so I think what we're sensing here is, Avi's constant struggle with this because of the controversy around, you know, alien technology. And so I think that's what he's trying to get across here. And he's using some pretty strong words. And now in this next sentence, while serving as referees or editors, they deny publications who offer alternatives. And by writing blogs or posting YouTube videos, they launch personal attacks to discredit imaginative scientists. This has gone on for eternity, right? This can be traced all the way back to beliefs of Copernicus or Galileo and how their lives were threatened, by their thinking. And today, I think it gets a little bit harder, more difficult, more pressure because of the wide-ranging tool sets that people have to communicate, and YouTube and other social media, and it can get pretty vicious out there, and that's unfortunate. So he also goes on to say their attitude is anti-scientific in the global scheme of science. Other branches of physics involve attempts to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, or to identify the nature of dark matter and dark energy, and were guided by speculative ideas for nearly a century. So that's a good example. And so finally, he says the thought police fails to discipline followers of these frontiers because they already represent a large community of large communities of scientists. So I think Avi is providing some insight into the philosophical struggle that we all face if we think outside of the box. And it very much reminds me of the allegory of the cave by Plato. And I won't get into that, but if you haven't read that, you should. And maybe that'll be a topic. I'll weave that into other videos. Now, Avi's direct answers to my questions definitely are hung on that philosophical struggle, but let's not forget that he did present a lot of content in the beginning of this essay that I believe is all relevant and in response to my question regarding the natural, but what are some of the natural explanations for these anomalies? So let's look at these papers and see if natural phenomenon is a consideration. So first up is a paper Avi co-authored titled "Is the Interstellar Object 3I Atlas Alien Technology?" And it's based on 3I Atlas's improbable trajectory. Now the authors clarify that they do not necessarily ascribe to the hypotheses. The paper itself, rather, is considered pedagogical, meaning it's merely an exercise for learning. Finally, the authors admit that 3I Atlas is most likely a natural comet. Next up is a collaborative publication that was titled VLT Observations of Interstellar Comet 3I Atlas, Dramatic Rise in Nickel and Cyanide Outgassing at Large Heliocentric Distances. And this paper reports spectroscopic data gathered by VLT instruments showing unusual nickel concentrations in the absence of iron. And the conclusion reveals three natural possibilities for the anomaly. One, rapid dissociation of nickel volatiles. Two, photo or thermal desorption of nickel from metallated organics. And three, selective liberation of nickel by space weathering. All possibilities all ready for further information. The final paper referenced by Avi is another independent study with a title, Extreme Negative Polarization of New Interstellar Comet 3I Atlas. Now the paper shares data on the level of negative polarization and the shallow inversion angle, and it concludes that this makes 3I Atlas unlike any other object we've ever observed, and it suggests that we need to broaden our view of the diversity of ISOs. And by sharing these links, Avi is demonstrating the value of collaboration and the importance of both data and all the ideas that surround that data. And it's incumbent upon us as scientifically inclined individuals or amateur astronomers to read the data, read the papers so that we can form our own opinions and follow along in the dialogue. One other very important link in Avi's paper, and that's the Loeb scale. And it's more formally known as the Interstellar Object Significance Scale. And it's a proposed classification system which extends the Torino scale for evaluating the potential technosignatures of ISOs. And I encourage people to follow up and read what is being proposed here, and you'll find that it's actually quite rational. The last interstellar comet that we saw prior to 3I Atlas was Borisov, and it was ranked level 0, meaning it was insignificant, it was consistent with known natural phenomena. There were no anomalies associated with Borisov. However, Oumuamua and 3I Atlas did show anomalies, that we have non-gravitational acceleration that was observed. We have spectral signatures, including anomalous spectrum that's inconsistent with solar reflection, or at least observed solar reflection in the past. And we know that there's some variations with respect to the known materials that make up this comet. It's very nickel rich and absent of iron. So, this is just a way to say, hey, look, there are some anomalies here. There are a significant number of anomalies that make this a candidate worthy of further exploration and study. I think that Avi actually did a terrific job of holistically answering my question related to 3I Atlas physical anomalies. Okay, so finally I asked why 3I Atlas matters scientifically, even if it turns out to be just another natural comet. What can it tell us about planetary systems beyond our own? And the specific wording I used with Avi was scientific importance. Why does 3I Atlas matter scientifically? Even if it turns out to be a completely natural comet, what can it tell us about planetary system formation beyond our own? And let's break down his response sentence by sentence. He starts by saying in the future, we could design interceptors that would collect materials from interstellar objects like 3I Atlas and return the samples to Earth for laboratory studies. So right away, Avi is again demonstrating how interested he is in these ISOs, and so much so that he believes we need to prepare now to be able to intercept them as they are passing through our solar system. So he's clearly saying there's a lot to learn from them and we need to invest. And he said this feat was accomplished by the OSIRIS-REx mission, which revealed that the building blocks of life in the form of most amino acids exist on the asteroid Bennu. And that's a great point. We have a history of, successfully being able to intercept objects that are moving quickly through our solar system. So why not do that now? And he's also pointing out that, the reference to amino acids, which is really the building block of life, that he's starting to imply that interstellar objects can tell us a lot about how life forms within a solar system. Finally, he says finding whether interstellar rocks contain the same building blocks for life would open a new frontier in astrobiology, very different from the current popular approach of searching for the chemical fingerprints of extraterrestrial life in exoplanet atmospheres. I have to tell you, I like his answer. It's definitely it shows his passion for the potential of life elsewhere in the universe, and he's recognizing how important these interstellar objects are to that quest, and I just love his perspective. When we're studying Atlas, we're peeking into the conditions of an entirely different star system, and maybe we're going to get some clues about life beyond Earth. So there you have it. Avi's responses to my three questions. Is he a sensationalist? Absolutely. Anybody who is passionate about what they believe in their mission is going to be somewhat sensational when discussing it. Is he overly speculative when it comes to his scientific contributions? No, I don't think so. I think he's doing the right thing by thinking out of the box, following the data where it leads him, and ensuring that there is a good structured framework to observe the possibilities. After all, that is the nature of scientific discovery.
So I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and I certainly hope that this helps you frame any discussions that you might have with others about 3I Atlas. This is an incredible object. We're going to learn so much from it passing through our solar system. We'll learn about interstellar comets. We're going to learn about our galaxy. We're even going to learn about the universe, I suspect. So it is a privilege for each and every one of us to be able to participate in discussion around this. It is completely accessible to us as amateurs. Get your telescopes ready. And I want to give a special thanks to Avi, who frankly, did not have to take the time to respond to my questions, but he did. And if you have not checked out Avi's essays, or you're curious about some of his scientific work, I encourage you to follow the links that I will put in the description below. And with that, I'm going to see everybody on the next video.